One Piece Chapter 1101 begins with a classic style action page: setup and payoff, wind-up and collision. It's not just seeing Luffy prepare an attack, but seeing the sheer height of the move that would someday destroy Arlong Park, emphasized by Kuma looking up at it. We needed to begin the chapter with an establishing shot anyway, but we might as well use that shot to convey the sense of altitude as well, instead of just setting up the attack with a closer shot that won't show the distance in the same way. The eye travels down with the blow, enhancing the impact. The ground curves and the dust forms an oval with it, and the rocks themselves break away, with the harsh shading making it feel like they're deep in the foreground coming towards us. But it's more than just the composition within the panel that's used to emphasize it. Notice not just how the kick aligns with the panel above, but also how it aligns with the break in the trees below. It's like the page itself was split in two by the impact. Chapter 1101 is bringing back some of the great action paneling I have been itching to talk about, but there are more clever tricks for the dialogue as well. We will get back to the action at the end of the chapter in one of the most satisfying scenes in the whole flashback. As I've talked about in previous videos, a scene will ebb and flow in whether it uses close-ups or wide shots to match how emotionally deep each beat of the conversation is. It's a basic but important principle. What I like here is how the panels zoom in on both Dragon and Kuma concurrently. The first panel sets it up with a closer shot of Dragon, and 2 panels later we get even more intense with him. But at the same time, the first panel was also a more distant shot of Kuma, showing how it began as less serious for him, so that it can eventually sink in. In addition to the zoom in, we also have him gradually turning around to face Dragon as the conversation goes on, matching the zoom in and how it shows he's realizing just what Dragon is saying. This is all shown so cleanly and clearly, such that even though 3 of the panels are close-ups and don't even show their relative positions, we still understand the dynamic between the 2 characters very well. I think this kind of careful way of paneling a conversation is just as important as big flashy action panels. And of course, as Kuma pulls away from that line of questioning, we pull out to a distant shot, as we've left personal matters behind. I like the panel of Kuma thinking because of how much is left unsaid. He is piecing together that Luffy is Dragon's son, yes, but Kuma is also someone who has experienced the weakness that a child, a loved one, represents. This is the moment of reflection for him, the moment where it's up to the reader to imagine just how much he is thinking about. The final thing that this page sets up is that Kuma is looking at Luffy from the right, and is positioned around here. Important setup for where he is about to disappear from. On the next page, Luffy's posture shows both his playful nature and directs the eye to where it needs to be, as it travels down with his body, then up with his leg towards the speech bubbles. After that, it can slide down with the animals to the next row of panels, which also brings the eye in the exact same direction Luffy is looking in, just as Kuma disappears. Because Kuma's position was established last page, we instinctively understand that he pushed himself away, even without seeing the action directly. And in a technique we have talked about many times, Kuma's disappearance appears before we see Luffy in the panel, making it clear that he was already gone before Luffy even looked. I love the way the story cuts to BONNEY waiting for Kuma's letters. Showing Kuma writing a letter, then going through 2 establishing shots of where BONNEY is, rather than just one, really emphasizes the distance between them. They are so far apart that even as readers, from panel to panel, we had to travel more than usual. The imagery of BONNEY waiting at the mail slot is the most important imagery in the chapter. Leave it to Oda to take a concept, a feeling of what a character is going through, and boil it down to an image. Just as he literally boiled Oden down to him boiling in oil while holding up his followers. As a quick aside, there's a really nice panel transition from the news coup down to the newspaper. It doesn't just direct the eye to where it should be, but directs it downward, matching the motion of the paper as it lands. And of course, only Oda will do something as goofy as hiding the top of Vegapunk's head with a speech bubble, just to give the page turn a cliffhanger that he's now done the thing where he takes out his brain. I made a whole video on the power of contrast. I made that video because, it might surprise you to learn, contrast is powerful. Look at how bright the scenes of BONNEY at her party are, and look at how they contrast the dimness of her waking up at night to wait for her letters. The shading contrast is matched by the contrast of joy and sorrow, of community and loneliness that this page incites. We go from the contrast between a party and BONNEY waiting for the letter, to the contrast of BONNEY barely holding it in, to her not holding it in at all. Anyway, let's talk about the action page at the end. How is that for a transition? This action page makes careful use of both right to left motion between Alpha and the ship, and the diagonal downward flow that you get when you go from one panel row to the next one. This makes it so Alpha still has a sense of momentum, but when we read Gyogyo's reaction or see Bonnie prepare her punch, we're still on their side. I like the sense of distance established between Alpha and the ship. First in a wider shot with a more emphasized foreground and background, then closed off in a smaller panel as she's almost there. If we want someone to feel fast, then we need a sense of the distance that they cross. We have a close-up of Alpha after her movement, because, as usual, how characters feel in a fight is as important as what they do. But what I find really interesting is the use of close-ups before the big punch. It's been a while since I've talked about the concept of closure, as defined by Scott McCloud, so let's review. When you go from panel to panel, the mind fills in what changed in between, be it a motion, an event, or anything else. I believe Oda takes this a step further and usually puts close-ups, small enough that the mind can still rush by quickly without slowing down the pace, in between the wind-up and the impact of an attack. By telling the mind that this moment in time exists, even if we weren't looking at Bonnie during that moment in time, it creates a space of time in the reader's mind where the fist moves. The eye can approach this impact page from any direction. There is enough detail going on that it incites you to slow down and take it in whether you start from the top or the bottom. If the eye comes in from the bottom, the fist leads the eye back up to Bonnie, leading to a realization that she's in the form of a powerful future self. And if your eye comes in from the top, then it travels down with the fist and really feels the momentum. By using the full height of the panel, we don't just compose an interesting shot to look at, but emphasize that Bonnie is greater than Alpha in power, both by being above her and by taking up more of the panel's space. This panel is full of circle compositions, from the top, where the attack begins, all the way to the impact itself, with some dust clouds in between really emphasizing the fist. The way the circles get larger the lower down you go gives a feeling of expansion, of power emanating outwards. Even the reaction shot to the side aligns with that shape. And of course, Bonnie parallels Luffy, not just in how her fist is shaded like Year 3, but in how the chapter has begun and ended, with two characters having massive downward attacks. Two characters ready to begin their journeys. If you're as excited to see what Bonnie does next in the story as you are for Luffy, then give the video a like. I talk about One Piece's paneling every week, though you might see another topic come up soon, so if you want to see more, subscribe. And comment if there are any moments of paneling in this chapter you loved that I missed, or if there's a past chapter you want me to talk about on a break week. See ya!